But welcome to this side event here at the Church Center for the United Nations. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm the program executive responsible for the Ecumenical Office to the United Nations and the World Council of Churches representative to the UN community. I'm going to be handing the mic over to my colleague Dinesh, who coordinates our Ecumenical Water Network. But first, I'd like to thank the partners of this gathering, the World Council of Churches, of course, PARD, the Partnership on Religion and Sustainable Development, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, and the World Evangelical Alliance. So thank you to all of our partners who are here with us, and thank you to all of you who have come. We are doing an experiment to do this hybrid, so both in person and online. So you'll see some of our participants online and our fancy new gadget here that we hope works well to make that go together. For those of you in the room, know that if you are within 18 feet of Eleanor, our owl, that your voice will be picked up, so the people who are listening in online. So if you're in the first couple of rows, please remember that whatever you say, everybody online will hear. And then when we open it up for questions, we will of course make it available for both online and participants here in the room. But without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to my colleague Dinesh.
Thank you very much. So friends, if you would have seen the program that we sent around, it's a very long list of speakers today, and thank you very much. And therefore, we have about 9 of us would be speaking, but we still will make sure that you have your opportunity also to raise questions both in this house as well as online. So we received nearly 125 registration, of which about 80 plus were online. I'm not sure, my colleague can tell how many are online, and about 45 to 50 had said they would join in person. So it's a very, very big thanks to all of you that you chose to come on the very first day of the UN Water Conference, the World Water Day, 22nd of March. And once again, on behalf of World Council of Churches, on behalf of the World Evangelical Alliance, the Partnership of Religion and Development, and Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, we are putting this conference together. So friends, I just want to take 2 minutes to set the context why we are here and why this is such an important UN water conference happening just in the UN headquarters, a stone throw distance from this building. So as faith communities, we strongly believe that water is a gift of God and a common good and a fundamental human right. However, not so long ago, only about in 2010, that water was recognized as a human right, thanks to the good work of several people that are also present here in this room and online. But till today, we have about 2 billion people who do not have access to clean water, and nearly 4 billion, or half of the world's population, not having access to safely managed sanitation. And that is where the UN Secretary General called to quadruple our efforts so that we do not miss the bus when it comes to SDG 6. And therefore, as Ryan and me were having an argument how many years. So since 1977, as we know, there was no official UN water conference that was called. But in 1977 in Argentina, in Mar del Plata, when we had the first ever water conference. Friends, it's also very important, and we as civil society faith-based organizations very happy about this, because when it comes to water, the United Nations does not have overseeing body which is intergovernmental or multilateral in its mechanism. We all know about today, World Water Day. Who observes it? UN Water, based in Geneva. Sorry to say, but it is more or less a toothless body with about a couple of staff based in Geneva. The job is only to ensure World Water Day is observed. Then we have Joint Monitoring Program, JMP report on water produced by UNICEF and WHO. Every year they publish it. They are based again in Geneva. Then we have UNESCO Water Assessment Program, and that's based in UNESCO's headquarters in Paris. And today, the World Water Development Report was published by them, UNESCO's World Water Development Report. And then we have one very important organization or instrument that is based in Geneva. That is the OHCHR, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And that gives rise to the safeguarding human right to water and sanitation. And we have Professor Pedro Arroyo Agudo, the current UN Special Rapporteur, who sits in Geneva, even though he is from Spain. His office is in Geneva. That is one significant and substantial instrument that UN provides. But these instruments do not talk to each other. Did you all hear Special Rapporteur speaking, UN Special Rapporteur in the opening plenary, in the opening ceremony? No, we didn't hear him. And that is why he is somewhat isolated in the corporate interests that we have on water in the UN system. And that is why one important thing we are looking at is a possible intergovernmental mechanism of UN. In simple words, my colleague Eva would later on say that a house for water or a home for water in the UN. So friends, faith communities, as most of us are here present, faith communities have a significant role, not only because water has strong spiritual value, but because we have that moral imperative and the authority to talk about human right in an ethical and just and in equity-based principles. So friends, I would not talk much and stop here. And therefore, we today would listen to various perspectives from various people who matter and who have significantly contributed to the success of where we are here today. And we also heard that it will not take another 50 years or 46 years for the next UN Water Conference, as the host country, Tajikistan, has already invited us. 2028, we will have another UN Water Conference in Tajikistan. And therefore, not 50, but another 5 years we have to wait. So friends, I would at this point would like to then go ahead and introduce the speakers that would speak. But just before that, a very quick 4 or 5 aims of the session that was sent to you online. But I want to also mention and reiterate here that we recognize the potential of faith communities to achieve SDG 6, and that is water and sanitation for all by 2030. So faith communities as important stakeholder, important right holders. Highlight faith-based good practices on water justice issues. We will listen to some of those. Spread the concept of blue communities. I don't know whether you had heard this before, but we will hear more. Affirm and sign the Water Justice Manifesto. I don't know if you heard that. You will hear it today. And finally, build synergies and develop networking of faith and interfaith actors attending the UN Water Conference. And this is something that you as faith-based organization must not feel left out in this ocean of scientific and diplomatic people that are around our civil societies. But you have an opportunity to articulate and share your concerns, views that will be taken up seriously. So with these few words of introduction, I would stop and quickly go to the next agenda item, which is, unfortunately, the UN Special Rapporteur could not be with us, but because he's attending a meeting in the building next to us, and he sent a video message.
Dear friends, first of all, thank you for the honor you have bestowed on me with this invitation. Shortly on 22, 23, 24 March, an event will be held in New York that should be historic, the Water Conference. It is the first time in almost 50 years that the United Nations convenes a global event to reflect on the global water crisis with 2 billion people without guaranteed access to safe drinking water and more than 4 billion without basic sanitation. Billions of people, the vast majority of whom are not properly thirsty people without water in their living environment, but severely impoverished people living next to rivers or unpolluted aquifers. To address this crisis, which ongoing climate change will undoubtedly exacerbate, I insist on the need to address two main challenges. The first one is to make peace with our rivers and other aquatic ecosystems. We will not be able to guarantee drinking water to these 2 billion impoverished people if we are not able to restore and conserve the rivers, wetlands, and aquifers from which they draw their daily water supply. The second main challenge is to promote democratic governance of water, understood as a common good, accessible to all, but not appropriable by anyone, and not as a commodity. When the management of water and sanitation services is privatized or water itself is commodified, citizens are transformed into mere customers. And so, far from helping to solve this global crisis, this privatizing approach contributes to aggravating it by making the most impoverished even more vulnerable, as poor customers who will not be able to pay for what are in reality their rights, their human rights. This is why the recommendations of both my predecessor, Professor Leo Heller, and myself in our respective thematic reports on the risks of privatization, commodification, and financialization of water encourage the promotion of participatory and transparent models of public management and community management reinforced by public-public and public-community partnership strategies. When I was appointed rapporteur almost 3 years ago, UN Water had taken the value of water as the theme of reflection presiding over the year's World Water Day. And I hastened to propose that we talk about the values of water in the plural, taking into consideration the multiplicity of functions and uses of water from which emerge values of different ethical categories that require setting priorities. How can we compare, for example, the value of the water we need to guarantee a dignified life for our families with the value of water to fill, even if legitimately, a swimming pool? We are talking about functions of water that lead me to speak of water as the blue soul of life. Values that, like true affection, which can neither be bought nor sold, as a Spanish song says, we say in Spanish, el cariño verdadero ni se compra ni se vende. That is why I always insist on the need for an ethical reflection on water management that should lead us to place the various uses and functions of water at different levels of ethical priority. Water for life, in life-supporting functions in general, and in particular the life and dignity of communities and individuals, must be managed with the highest priority. Water for life is that vital minimum we need to guarantee a dignified life as a human right, and which in fact demands less than 5% of the water we are extracting daily from nature. No river will dry up if we take 5% of the water we are taking from it at present. Water for life is also the water needed by impoverished rural communities to produce their own food, which falls within the scope of the human right to food. And water for life is also the water needed to maintain ecological flows to ensure healthy and sustainable rivers, which falls under the human right to healthy and sustainable environment. Second level, water for the general interest. At the second level of priority should be the uses and functions that we consider to be in the general interest of the community or the society. Third level, water for economic development in productive activities beyond the satisfaction of human rights, in uses that allow us to improve our standard of living, or we could even say to get richer legitimately. But such uses must be placed in a third level of priority, taking into account that this is the level in which the greatest demands and the greatest risks of contamination are generated. And finally, water crime, I used to say in a provocative way, in productive uses that put public health and ecosystem sustainability at risk, and which, being illegitimate, should be illegal and avoided at all costs, such as, open pit mining, for instance, that generate toxic pollution, or even fracking, for instance. Assuming these ethical priorities in the legislation and regulations governing water management will allow us to develop an approach governed by the paradigm of sustainability and by the priority of human rights as demanded by the United Nations. An approach that is in direct contradiction with the strategies of privatization, commodification, and even speculative financialization promoted by those who aspire to manage water as a business opportunity, instead of facing the global water crisis as a challenge of democratic governance. The blue communities are, for me, really an exemplary reference of how to face the global water crisis on this water planet, the blue planet, responsibly assuming both the challenge of making peace with our rivers and promoting a democratic governance of water from a human rights-based approach. Thank you. Thank you to the municipalities, the universities, trade unions, and so many social organizations that wave this citizen alliance of democratic responsibility. Thank you. Finally, I would like to address specifically the churches, faith communities, and interfaith platforms that I know are an important part of these blue communities. All the religious doctrines and thoughts I know, including beliefs inspired by ancestral worldviews that indigenous peoples keep alive today, offer visions, liturgies, and traditional practices based on a deep respect for water as the blue soul of life. Therefore, my friends, while thanking you as rapporteur for the ethical lessons you offer us, I dare to suggest something that I have been suggesting for some time, and that I will suggest once again in the form of a question. Would we all be capable of promoting perhaps on World Water Day 2024, we have a 1 year, a World Day of ethical reflection on water, to be held in churches, temples, and ceremonial places of the multiple faiths and beliefs, each with its liturgies and practices. It would certainly give a tremendous moral boost to the struggle of water defenders and the United Nations to accelerate the pace of achieving SDG 6. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the UN Special Rapporteur was talking about prioritizing water usage and how human right to water takes priority over everything else. Talked about blue community and also talked about collectively how faith communities plays important role in protecting the water defenders and the human right to water. So friends, the next we have this segment have an interviewing style where I would ask a few questions to our speakers and they would then respond the responses briefly within 5 to 7 minutes so that we can continue and give some room for questions and answers too. So I would request Reverend Dr. Kenneth Matata to please come and take your seat. And let me quickly introduce Reverend Dr. Kenneth Matata. He is the director of the Public Witness and Diaconia program of the World Council of Churches. And this department encompasses all the humanitarian aid and developmental work that World Council of Churches does. And he has taken over this responsibility from this year, from January. And we welcome you also to this conference, Dr. Matata. And prior to working with the WCC, he was the General Secretary of the Zimbabwean Council of Churches. He's a Zimbabwean national. He also has earlier worked as the Study Secretary for Theology and Practice at the Lutheran World Federation in Geneva. So without further ado, we now come to some conversation. The World Council of Churches is a blue community. And tell us briefly about the journey of the World Council of Churches becoming a blue community, but more importantly, why faith matters when it comes to addressing global water crisis. So you have about 5 to 7 minutes, Dr. Matata.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't know if someone needs 7 hours on this topic or 7 minutes, but I think from the UN Special Rapporteur, we got a very important introduction and framing of this conversation. And where I speak from World Council of Churches, which is a platform of many church families, more than 350 of them, encompassing more than 500 million of people in the world. We can already see that the place of water is a significant issue. Not only because water is a resource that is useful for religious practices, for baptisms, for cleansings, and for various ceremonies, but because water is also at the center of the way we understand life. And it is no surprise that in the East reflection within the World Council of Churches, in 2006, at its General Assembly, the World Council of Churches at the 9th Assembly in Porto Alegre took a position inspired by the mandate of Water for Life, which the rapporteur was referring to, as a way of interpreting the place and the centrality of water in our care for creation, but also in the sustaining of life. 10 years after, in 2006, then because of this commitment, the WCC committed itself to the 2016 to the community, the blue community, which Dr. Maud is going to talk more about. And I think this commitment is part and parcel of this journey of the self-understanding of the faith communities as custodians of this common good, which is water, for its significance for the whole humanity, but particularly also for the faith community. And now we are here at this important UN Water Conference, where the WCC is one of the signatories to the manifesto water justice, which is also a continuing commitment to how, not only with the other faith actors and interfaith actors, but also with the broader civil society, how the WCC wants to shape the agenda on water. And I think this journey, in my interpretation, is characterized by three important issues that I hope we should highlight. First, I think it is this recognition that water is a gift from God. And as a gift from God, it must be accessible to all people. And for this reason, one of our responsibilities as faith communities, but also together with other people of goodwill, is to make sure that we defend all communities whose access to water is impeded. And we can see already what some of the challenges that are limiting this access to water are to be. So I think this is one important issue that I can speak about from the faith perspective, that water as a gift, first and foremost, needs to be made accessible to all people. And you know, when I speak about this, when I hear all these statistics, I see that sometimes they are presented as numbers that 2 billion people do not have access to clean water, 4 billion have no access to sanitation. But from the village that I come from, I can see young girls at the age of 7 walking almost 10 kilometers to go and carry water. So this for me is far much more than a statistics. It's real people whose future is almost going to be destroyed simply because they cannot have access to water. The second issue, I think, which is a key interpretive lens to our discussion from a faith perspective, is that we need to understand that there are new interests that seem to be gaining ground in the way we reflect on water. And this is the movement driven by interests of profits and privatization. Now, we know that many governments are seeing the world development agenda as something that will require private actors to get involved because they bring resources, they bring innovation, and they bring different technologies. But the big challenge is that the entry of private sector into the imagination of the future, when it is only driven by interests, can quickly move beyond the way we can together reimagine this future as just and inclusive. So what is going to be the place of private enterprise? What is the place of private actors? What is the role of the relationship between private actors and governments and the broader civil society? We still feel that the public, the goods that are public, need to remain public goods. And public goods need to be those goods that people should be able to access, even if they cannot afford financially. And I think this is a commitment that governments must make, and we as churches, we will invite everyone to cooperate as we make this claim. The third, I think, interpretive lens in this reflection is something I think you have highlighted, Dinesh, in your opening remarks. One way to ensure that there is a coherent discussion in this regard and make sure that the calls from civil society, from churches, and from other actors are taken seriously is when we have a coordinated mechanism within the UN, which is accountable not only to governments, but to citizens in general, so that the conversation on water remains a transparent process. Because in so doing, then there is also important contribution from other actors other than from government and from private sector. I would want us to take very seriously the challenge that we have been given by the rapporteur, that in 2024, we maybe commit this day into a global ethical reflection, because I think this ethical conversation permeates beyond rights, but also to dignity of life. And I would think that from the faith perspective, this is a journey worth traveling. Moving from the time when it was a mere conversation to a time when water was recognized as a right, but it must be something that we continue to look at as something that is dignifying, that we continue to claim. I think for my initial inputs, these are the few remarks that I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Kenneth. I think you have outlined beautifully how as faith communities our belief that water for life must take precedence over water for profit, which the other camp has completely turned it around, and water for profit drives them, and therefore privatization and so on. And I think the special rapporteur will be very happy as being the deputy of the World Council of Churches. You are also assuring that by 2024, the World Water Day, we can have an ethical global discourse on water. And that's, I think, very encouraging. And I'm sure all of you also will join in. Thank you so much. So at this point, I would invite and move on to the next speaker, who basically needs no introduction, but Maud, would you please come over here? Tell us why and what is a blue community, and also take time to speak on the PPP of your version, as well as the PPP that the UN Secretary General mentioned today in his opening speech.
Yes, as the Special Rapporteur Pedro so eloquently said, nobody is anymore arguing that water is not a human right. Now, you can say to me, was there ever a fight? Oh, you bet there was. I'm a Canadian. In 2010, when the United Nations recognized the human rights to water and sanitation, my government led the fight against the human right to water. I was embarrassing, believe me, because that's when I was working with the President of the UN General Assembly. So it was a real struggle. Nobody's arguing it, and everybody's using all the same language, that water is the commons and part of the common good and it's a human right. But there are still very deep divisions between those who say, we really mean it, it's a human right, and therefore it must be democratically governed, and it must be held within democratic hands. It must be controlled in a way that is transparent and reflected back to the people. Not too much, all right, so but that's going to make it hard for people. So, and those, as Pedro said, who basically say that water is commodity like oil and gas that should be put on the open market for sale, like, just let the market decide the level. And there are many, many forms of ways in which water is being encircled by corporate and private interests. One, of course, is the privatization of water services in municipalities. Started with Margaret Thatcher back in 1987. The World Bank picked it up and started promoting it in the South. We have water markets and water trading, where water is separated from land and able to be sold. Australia, Chile, many parts of the United States. Water now is allowed to be futures market in the United States. California water is now part of a system where you can buy up assets, water assets, and just assume that the crisis is going to get worse, and hold on to it at a certain idea. And the people who are promoting it are saying that they're doing that, trying to figure out how they're coming with that. So it really is a mighty contest. In my country, back in 2009, the year before the UN recognized human rights, this same government that didn't recognize human rights started to say to municipalities in Canada, if you want federal funding for municipal water upgrading or new infrastructure, you have to private partnership. And that is where technically government controls it, but it's given for the operation to the private company to make the decisions about how much they're going to charge and how many people they're going to lay off, and the quality of service that they're going to get. So we were going through that phase in our country, and we decided to launch something called Blue Communities. First, it was only Canada, and it was only for municipalities. The concept was that we wanted to be for something, against something, but for a vision. And originally there were three pledges: to protect and promote water as a human right.
Sorry, Mo, there's a feedback. They are not able to hear. Maybe a little louder. Yeah. Sorry.
So the three pledges that a municipality takes are to promote and acknowledge, recognize, and promote water as a human right, to promote and protect water as a public trust. Therefore, it has to be run as a public service, not privatized. And where there's clean, safe water coming out of the tap, and we understand that's not everywhere, that we would phase out or ban the sale of water venues and so on. And it just spread like wildfire in my country because municipalities wanted to get to it before the federal government could move in and say, you've got to privatize. Got rid of that government, we got rid of that program, but meanwhile, it started to take off. And the first city outside of Canada that became a blue community was Bern, Switzerland. Bern was the first, then the Reformed Church in Bern, a number of universities in Bern, and there are now 40 blue communities in Bern, and it spread to Europe. Berlin, for instance, was one of the big cities that tried privatization of water services. It turned out to be a terrible mistake. They had a referendum, a plebiscite to get their water back, and then they decided we never want to have that again, and became a blue community. Paris became a blue community after ending their contract with Suez and Veolia. They set up a public company called Eau de Paris, which I think is quite wonderful. And so it has spread, and we now have something like 25 million people living in official blue community cities around the world. The first in the United States was Los Angeles, and that was quite a feat. And when people say to me, talk about the reality of the situation of your people in the village you come from, it's really important for us to say that there's a lot of there's a lot of discrimination and inequality in the world. In the Los Angeles area, there are more than 1 million people who don't have access to water and sanitation. It's really, really becoming a global reality. It's not just the parts of the world, because as we deepen the inequality between parts of the world, but within countries, we're seeing this grow. And then it started to move into faith-based communities, and this wonderful person beside me decided he was going to push this. Well, it was started, as you heard so eloquently earlier, and still one of the most beautiful statements that I've ever heard, why faith-based people care. And I'll tell you, a group of religious sisters were extremely important to us in getting the language of the human right to water put back in SDG 6, which just somehow mysteriously had been taken out. And so in the negotiations leading up to that, faith-based community was extremely important for us to be working with. I want to say that we've had a lot of success in many ways. I just gave Dinesh a copy of a new book I've written on hope, because I worry very much about the next generation hearing about, 10 years left of the healthy planet, or I can't imagine being 14 and hearing that. And the planet's going to be here in 10 years. Will it be better? Will it be worse? I don't know. That depends on what we do now. But the concept of hope I use is what I call wise hope, which is that you're not pretending things aren't what they are. You face reality, you look it in the face, and you say, I'm going to do something anyway. And you know that you can't control the outcome, but you put your hand out to touch the world and touch the universe in a way that you could mend it. And you have to have faith that others are doing the same. And that's where the faith-based part of this comes in. You can't do it by yourself, and you have to build a movement through faith-based movements is incredibly important part of this work. And so I want us to think about the good things that are happening. Yes, it's been 47 years since we had conference on water, but we're doing it. We now have close to 50 countries in the world that have either amended their constitutions or introduced new legislation guaranteeing the human right to water. We have a number of important court cases where the resolution at the UN has been instrumental in a really positive outcome. Most people don't know this, but a couple of months ago, the General Assembly of the United Nations recognized water, the human right to a healthy environment, led by another special rapporteur, David Boyd, who's a Canadian, really important. There's a lot of wonderful work being done on the whole concept of the rights of Mother Earth, the rights of nature. There's a very good side event going to be put on day after tomorrow by the Global Alliance on Rights of Nature. And so this is another way in which we're moving forward, understanding that nature has rights. Rivers have rights to flow. Aquatic life, other species have rights to survive. And thinking of it as just a resource for us, it's got us into this place, into this mess in the first place, and something that we have to stop doing. And I think the whole understanding around biodiversity and the need for understanding the whole picture, that it's been one of my concerns that we tend to look at water as being, the water crisis as being a climate crisis. But in fact, the way we abuse and divert and dam rivers to death and pollute is one of the causes of the climate change, or the climate crisis. And protecting and restoring watersheds, wetlands, soils, forests, this is absolutely incredible. I've seen a sea change in a very and very last thing to say to you around blue communities is that we're really, I mean, it is my dream. The goal of my life that people turn blue. we go blue, maybe one person at a time. I was at an event and spoke on this, and this woman came up to me and said, I'm a blue community. And I said, all by yourself? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, she said, I drank bottled water. I just drank my last bottle. There it is, it's gone. And I never knew anything about this, but I'm going to learn about it. But municipalities, but governments are understanding the need as well. To stop and think when a northern wealthy government promotes public-private partnerships in the global south. This is wrong. This is one of the reasons that most of the European cities and their World Council of Churches added a fourth dimension to the pledges, which is to promote public-private partnerships. And this is a very important part of the work that we're doing. So yes, there's a place for the private sector, but it needs to be governed by democratically elected entities that are overseeing, and no profit motive should be involved in the decision around who has access to water or who's getting to use that water and how and why. That has to be done under democratic control, and that's just so fundamental to the work that we're doing. Last thing to say on this hope issue is that we have some people in the room here who are working on the whole concept of blue schools. We have colleagues from Quebec and wonderful people that I'm working with from English-speaking Canada on launching a project to get to kids to basically have the same pledges around protecting water as a human right, proactively understanding their need to protect it, understanding the plastics crisis. A new report from the UN last week said that in spite of all the work we're doing on plastics, they're projecting that we're going to double the amount of water by 2030. And if we just have that, we could probably provide safe municipal services for it. So we need to catch that. And the best way to catch that is to start with kids very young. So anybody interested, please, it's not quite, ours isn't quite ready to be made public. It's getting, I really do think that we need to be blue communities, blue schools, and turning our world.
Thank you. Friends, we have to now move on to the next in line is another very high profile speaker. We are doing this event jointly with the World Evangelical Alliance, and we are very pleased to have the Secretary General of the World Evangelical Alliance, Archbishop Professor Thomas Scrimsher. He's also one of the highly intellectual. He has about 4 doctorate degrees in theology. So very highly intellectual person. Archbishop is the Secretary General of the WEA, which connects Protestant churches belonging to 143 national evangelical alliances. And before becoming the Secretary General, Archbishop served the World Evangelical Alliance in various leadership roles over the last 2 decades. Archbishop Thomas also holds the honorary position of the President of the International Council of the International Society for Human Rights and co-president of Religions for Peace, New York. So the community here is not a stranger to Archbishop Thomas. So Bishop Thomas, please add further the spiritual significance of water and any other good practices or actions that the World Evangelical Alliance is engaged in protection of right to water, or any other topic that you need to contribute in about 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an honor to speak to you all. I wanted to be in New York myself, but for health reasons I had to stay here. You will see among our midst my deputy. That was the highest person I could send, Samuel Chiang. He's sitting in the middle of you all. And of course, WA is well represented. John Girgis, our permanent representative to the UN. Matthias Böning, who is representing the WA to the UN here in Bonn, to the Climate Change Secretariat, and Chris Elisara from the World Evangelical Alliance Sustainability Center. Probably there are others there I cannot see. I'm also glad to cooperate with PART, with the Lutheran Church in America, but especially with the World Council of Churches. It is just some days ago that we cooperated at the UN in the side event in Geneva on a totally different topic, together with Caritas International, our Catholic friends, questioning the sanctions around the world and the result they have on food, on water, and many other things for the poor people in the country. So we are a good team, I think. Representing a very diverse group of Christian groups. I have to say that for me, it is not just representing WA when I'm here. I feel it too very important personally to be available. I was there when the plastic treaty was decided on by the United Nations Environment Assembly, and was very, very happy. And of course, this relates to what we have in common as the groups working together here, not only water as human rights, not only leave it in the hand of the public, not only promote public-public partnerships, but also no to bottled water. We know that a lot of people still depend on bottled water, but of course, this is a major issue when it comes to the plastic treaty. WA is very much involved on a local level. I love projects we have in Africa where our people sit with local communities, with villages, and to ensure that when we dig wells and we go for local drinking water, that this is a project of the community. So we have a nice project where then everybody buys a brick that then finally, and even puts his name on it, so that the brick, the well really is owned by the local people and protected by the local people. Let me say in very principle, the top level is human rights is drinking water is human rights. I have written this in our book, Creation, Care, and Loving Your Neighbor. My own contribution is the human right to drinking water, a newly invented right on ancient obligation. I think religious communities have no choice than to say it's an ancient obligation that has been covered under the human rights for food and other places and now has its own life. But from the very beginning, let me say it very simple, it's God's fault that he created humans in a way that we cannot live without water. And when I was asked for the lecture here in Romania, with this question, is this a new invention? Do we get new human rights around the clock? I said, it's a very simple fact. Without water, there is no life. And life is the highest human right we have. So if you take away water from people, and if it is only because you make it for private gain and so expensive that people have no access to it, then people die. And that is the most evil human rights violation that there is. That's very simple. And if you don't believe me, sorry for saying this, test it out for a week to live without water, and you will agree with me. But that's the negative side. All faith communities, all world religions, not only Christianity, Islam, the Jewish community, Buddhists, Hindus, all agree and call it living water. Jesus, the founder of my own religion, he stated, "Give freely from the springs of the water of life," in the book of Revelations. And John clarifies that the living water is Jesus himself. This is the best picture you can give of Jesus, that he is the living water, because living water is life. It is not only a symbol of life, it is life. We inherited all this from the Tanakh, from what we call the Old Testament, from our Jewish friends. And there, especially in Exodus 17:3, it says, water, without clean water, there can be no life. And the abundant provision of water is a sign of shalom, of peace, of good rain. Access to clean water is a right under God for all humans. This is just the reality. I have to say, I do not find it easier with any other human rights to prove that it is a human rights than with the human rights to drinking water. It's so simple, it's so obvious. And I think religious communities from all over the world, large religions, small religions, have to stress this, that in this case, there might be discussions about the political implementation. But the basic fact where we start is life depends on water. So life is water, and water is life. And if you deny drinking water to people, you deny them nothing less than the pure life. And the same is true. I have no time to go into details. When you look in our Holy Scripture, both in the Jewish scripture of our Jewish friends and the so-called New Testament, you also will find very early on provisions around waste, around rubbish, around how to go about assuring that cleanness is available and does not destroy the base for life, and especially the water. And I know there are very similar provisions in many other world religions. Friends, let's not first of all look at this important political fight and the things we are asking for, but let's make it very simple. If you believe that this is a creation, you will have to believe that water is life, and therefore water is a human right, and it's one of the first things we have to do, assure that everybody has drinking water and has guaranteed to live, because it does not lack it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Archbishop Thomas, for underlining that water is a fundamental human right, and Jesus being the living water, life is water, water is life. That's beautifully put. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, due to lack of time, we cannot have a longer discourse on this. So friends, you may be wondering why we do not have all the speakers seated here, because several are speaking online, and it'll be difficult for the speakers to then look at the screen turning their back. So we would now move on to the next speaker, who is Dr. Iyad Abu Mowgli, the founder and director of the Faith for Earth initiative of the United Nations Environment Program, the UNEP. He has more than 38 years of experience with international organizations, private sector, the scientific institutions, etc. And he is the lead principal advisor on engaging with faith-based organizations at UNEP. And previously, Dr. Abu Mogli has held several leading positions in various UN sectors, including here in the UN New York. So without further ado, let me now invite you, Dr. Iyad. You have a 5 actions agenda. Now we have the 5 themes here in the UN Water Conference. So what are the 5 actions for faith actors in the UN Water Conference that you want us to draw into? And what is Faith for Earth's vision for Water for All? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dinesh, and good morning and good evening from here. I'm delighted to be with you, and I have enjoyed listening to each and every one of you. So what I would like to share with you would sound like summarizing what has been mentioned, and what I call the 5 actions that we as faith community need to be advocating for with the politicians who are discussing water from a political point of view. However, we see it more than this. So my first point, which has been touched upon by Archbishop Thomas and others, that we need to maximize the spiritual importance of water and the narrative around water resources and sanitation. As was mentioned, all religions consider water as a sacred gift from God and recognize it as a source of life. While significant difference exists between religions in their relationship and ritual practices with water, it is the symbol that unites all religions regarding its importance and use. The fact that water features prominently in all religions reflects the truly transboundary nature of water on Earth and its connecting qualities. There are traits of religious associations with water that are shared between all religions. For example, as a purifier for Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Hindus and Buddhists, they use water to purify whether their sins or to purify their bodies. Having the power to both create and destroy, thus its association with both heaven and hell, and retribution for committed sins. And we know the floods that are mentioned in the Bibles, the Quran, and the Torah. Water is also a medium that links this world to the other world, and water is a healing element for all religions. It's just statistically, water is mentioned 722 times in the Bible and 63 times in the Holy Quran. Many Buddhists refer to flowing rivers as waters of life. So whole ecosystems by the Buddhists and the Hindus are considered as sacred because of their sacred nature. The other element that I would like to pay attention to, as also was mentioned, the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation. As it was recognized by the UN General Assembly and the Human Rights Council as part of binding international law in 2010. In Article 1 of that international law says the human right to water is indispensable for leading a life in human dignity. It is a prerequisite for the realization of other human rights. So it's an important element for human rights. The right to water entitles everyone to have access to sufficient, safe, acceptable, physically accessible, and affordable water for personal and domestic use. It is not acceptable at all for the young girl that was mentioned today to walk tens of kilometers just to fetch water for her family. And we are in 2023, the 21st century, the century of innovation and technology. The third point, we need a faith action agenda in line with the main outcome of the conference, which is the water action agenda. As water-related voluntary commitments to accelerate progress on the water action decade 2018-2028 and the Sustainable Development Agenda, we need clear commitments, pledges, and actions by faith actors and faith-based organizations that help deliver on water action that can be scaled and replicated to contribute to accelerating the implementation and improve the impacts towards achieving the water-related goals and targets. And we have just launched with our partners, the Parliament of World Religions and the United Religions Initiative and Yale Forum, a special report on SDG 6 and the contributions of faith-based organizations. And we have cited a number of excellent examples by the faith-based organizations on dealing with water and sanitation. The fourth point, actions related to water should be inclusive, comprehensive, and connected in an integrated approach, emphasizing what is known at the global level as integrated water resources management, the three principles of social equity, economic efficiency, and environmental sustainability. Water is part and parcel of the three planetary crises of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. This triple planetary crisis has adverse effects on fresh water, but when protected, restored, and well managed, freshwater ecosystems help us take action to combat all three crises. Climate change impacts, including the glacial melt, the changes in precipitation, water scarcity, floods, and droughts, are threatening freshwater ecosystems and human health worldwide. As you know, 80% of global wastewater is estimated to enter water bodies untreated, polluting the freshwater bodies such as rivers and lakes, and with impacts on human and ecosystem health. While 6% of total biodiversity rely on freshwater habitats for their survival. However, around 1/3 of all freshwater biodiversity faces extinction due to invasive species, pollution, habitat loss, and over-harvesting. When protected and restored, freshwater ecosystems have seen returns of biodiversity, as there are few examples demonstrating that. And my final point is on multilateralism. And Dinesh, you started the meeting by saying there's no global multilateral agreement or body taking care of water issues. So it is important to connect the faith actors, other stakeholders, politicians, and scientists to create a unified front in achieving the water targets. The engagement at the Water Summit and other international fora brings us closer to connecting faith values and the scientific evidence to design and adopt policies, international laws, and other mechanisms that are scientifically based and spiritually charged and morally driven for improving the lives of the people and the health of the planet. We cannot anymore protect our national water resources, our national rivers, our national water bodies, because every drop of water is important to the international community. So working with one another in a multilateral system will achieve the objectives that we all aspire of not having anybody without access to water and access to sanitation. Thank you very much.
Now, friends, we'll move on to the next speaker. Please come over here, Kristen. And that's Kristin Moffett. She is the interim program director of the environmental policy of the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And Kristin comes from both environmental science and political science background. And Kristin has a particular interest and research experience in the interconnectedness of the environmental issues and how that may influence the institutional fit of governance. So, Kristin, you please try to explain to us about the last LWF Assembly's theme on creation, not for sale, versus what we are seeing today is the commodification or privatization of water. Go ahead, please.
Yes, colleagues, friends from the faith and UN communities, I want to thank you for having me here. I'm truly honored to be included with such a distinguished group of speakers today. It's been lovely to hear what you have to say. So before I begin, I want to bring you greetings from the Lutheran World Federation and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which I'm here to represent. I also wanted to take this opportunity to name the dedication and enthusiasm of my fellow young people on this issue. Many are exhausted with just the talk of a climate crisis and human right to water, and they demand action. So it's on their shoulders that I'm able to be here and engage with you in the dialogue. However, I hope that we can accept their challenge to move this from talk to action. So to your question, we are seeing more and more through commodification and financialization and the privatization of water and other natural resources that profit is put before health and well-being of people and creation. We live in a moment when virtually all goods are commodified, but nature and the atmosphere are still too often treated as a resource with value only when it can provide profit. Although as stewards of creation, we should be able to recognize that there is indeed a price to these choices, a rapidly increasing price. And that cost is a bill that is presented to us in the form of a climate crisis accompanied by issues of desertification, biodiversity loss, extreme weather events, and the contamination of resources, just to name a few. And this bill is being paid at the cost of human health and well-being, increasing the vulnerability of people already put at a risk by the social injustices of racial, gender, class, and caste discrimination and marginalization. Water is such an important facet of environmental concern because it's completely vital to human existence, but it rarely respects boundaries or the political state of affairs. We may or may not share nationalities, political principles, or religious convictions, but we do share the water that we drink, or more notably, the water that we ought to share equitably. Additionally, the increasing risks of water scarcity due to climate change threaten all water uses, but especially those linked to the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation for all. In this context, the commodification of water increases vulnerabilities of those living in cycles of poverty and denying them the most basic rights, the right to life, which is the right to water. Additionally, the economy's growing financialization is leading to water management becoming exploitable and lucrative financial asset instead of a safeguard against inequity. Lastly, privatization of water resources can lack accountability, and it excludes the importance of diverse actors in this decision-making. When only one voice, nation, religion, race, gender, class, or age is controlling something so central like the right to clean water and sanitation, there's little hope that all will receive this benefit.
Kristin also is speaking on behalf of the young people that the Lutheran community is continuously promoting its presence in the climate change discourses or on right to water discourses. So thank you so much. Maybe within another couple of minutes, if you can share some of the good practices from ELCA on right to water.
Yeah, so as Lutherans, we wholly believe that we have dual responsibilities to foster human well-being and the well-being of all creation. And so in our mission to do so, our approach is rooted in deep, authentic listening to neighbors and companions. not so that we might lead, but that we might journey with, learn from, and celebrate together. So a few themes that we focused on are education, accompaniment, togetherness, and advocacy. So for education, the ELCA specifically has prioritized faith formation that raises awareness of the injustices that lie at the heart of the water crisis, and helps people of all ages connect water justice to their faith. Some examples would include our Vacation Bible School programs and a Walk for Water campaign from ELCA World Hunger. Stewardship of natural resources for Lutherans is an expression of the justice we are called to by God to practice, and it's deeply interwoven into our faith formation. Accompaniment. So each of the water projects the ELCA supports involves local neighbors in leadership and implementation. This ensures that the projects meet the community's needs and equips them for sustainable maintenance and new water access points, continued teaching, knowledge sharing, and long-term change. So for example, in the Central African Republic, a partner assisted with the installation of latrines and the development of a spring. Local residents were involved in the planning, the construction, and afterwards were able to form a water management team to continue the oversight of these new wash systems. So while access points, for example, are important, the larger aim is to foster the agency of the local communities when it comes to managing the water in the land. So for togetherness, in 2022, the Lutheran Church in El Salvador helped local leaders and neighbors organize to restore polluted microbasins to provide access to clean water for 8 communities in the region. While the project involved river cleanups and planting of trees, the larger focus was on the people building power together to advocate for clean water and wider access. By organizing as a water board and as committees together, they were able to have a deeper, more sustainable, and effective impact on water that they depend for their lives. And lastly, for advocacy, the LWF member church in Guatemala actively advocates for the rights of indigenous communities to protect the natural resources in the Grenadillas Mountains and Guatemala's Zacapa department, an ecosystem known for its biodiversity that provides fresh water supplies for more than 300,000 indigenous people. This is just one example of the ways the LWF and the ELCA together advocate for change, particularly this week through our joint ministry here at the Water Conference with the Lutheran Office for World Community just across the hall.
Okay.
I do want to add, if you can take anything away from this, I want to leave us with 3 calls to action. First, I ask that we have to start listening to young people, to women, to marginalized leaders and communities, in short, to the people that are so often excluded from the conversations, which has been mentioned here today, which is great. Second, we need to step aside and recognize that effective leadership for change is already happening, and indigenous communities across the world have given us that blueprint. And lastly, to the UN, the SDGs are reviewed and monitored by statistical analysis, and we are calling that the UN recognize that behind every data point is a person, a human story, and we all are able to bear witness to these human stories. Some have already been mentioned by speakers, because this is truly a life and death issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next in line is Bishop Temple. Please come over here as I introduce you, Bishop. Bishop Temple is the chairperson of the World Council of Churches Ecumenical Water Network, and he is also the president of All Africa Conference of Churches. Bishop Temple, Bishop Emeritus of the Methodist Church in Sierra Leone, and he is a former Central Committee member of the World Council of Churches, the highest governing body. So, Bishop Temple, very quickly to ask you, as you represent the All Africa Conference of Churches, very quickly the situation of right to water in Africa, and what is the response of the churches?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dinesh. And Good day to all of you. Happy to be here, and thanks for the inputs that we've already received. You know, we've talked about water is life, it is human right, it is a common good. But for me, it's how do we make all of that a reality for our people in Africa? How do we make that a reality? Dinesh, you asked, what's the situation of human rights to water in Africa? If I should answer in 3 words, I'll simply say it is bleak. It is bleak. About 360 million people are without safe drinking water. That is about 30% of the population. So how can the language that we employ in our conversations be a reality in the lives of our people? Give a thought to the people in the Horn of Africa. Here we're talking about countries like Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and the rest. Give a thought to that. Rainfall in the Horn of Africa is far below average, and that makes water a scarce resource. People migrate in search of water. Lives are lost. Crops dried up, and livestock do not survive the situation. Livelihood is lost as a result. The conflicts in the region have compounded the crisis, resulting in disease and death. Millions of people in Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia are water unsecured. You see, it's a story. It's a reality of what is happening. The effect of all that we've been talking about, all the theories that we've come up with, this is the real effect of it. In the Nigeria situation, there was a controversial water resource bill that vested control of groundwater in the hands of the federal government. That was introduced and vehemently opposed by water rights activists, including the Ecumenical Water Network, the African region of the Ecumenical Water Network. Pastor Kolade would have been here, but for this purpose, I believe he's listening to us online presently. I think of my own country, Sierra Leone. The pollution of water by miners in Sierra Leone is an example of the violation of rights to water, rights to clean water in our continent. The miners use chemicals such as mercury and cyanide to mine on the riverbanks of River Pampana, River Tai, River Jong, and other rivers. These rivers had been the main water sources of the population. Now they're not. The color of the water is now chocolate brown as you look at it. No one needs to tell you that it's polluted. Just by looking at it and you see water that's supposed to be clear and white, now turned chocolate brown. And people who were using that water for drinking and sanitation purposes no longer do so. They have to go miles to find water for their domestic usage. Like the recreation, people used to swim in that river. Now they don't, because immediately you get into it, you come out with skin diseases, rashes all over your body. Women used to plant their vegetables on the banks of those rivers. Now, they are no longer green vegetables, but brown, no longer fit for eating. The fishes die and float on the river. So imagine the livelihood taken away, the food resource taken away. People have to walk miles to fetch water. The Christian Council of Churches in Sierra Leone, which is part of the constituency of the Ecumenical Water Network of the WCC, undertook a fact-finding mission and made sure that the findings reached the government agencies that regulate the environment and the mining sector. Plastics in our rivers and oceans, they are there. Fishes are dying because of plastic. They're suffocated, all because the authorities are failing in providing quality waters to our people. That's why the manufacturers of this plastic water are making so much money. What life are we offering to the future generation in Africa? How can we achieve the aspiration of Goal 6, clean water and sanitation for all, against the year 2030? How can that be achieved? Time is not in our favor. The Ecumenical Water Network of the World Council of Churches is working with churches throughout the AACC, the All Africa Conference of Churches, and the Ecumenical Water Network Africa to address the situations through advocacy and sensitization, thus empowering the churches as forefront players in the search for water justice. Our eco schools have been of great value, especially in the multiplication of trainers in all regions. Friends, this is our story.
Bishop. Now, friends, we have to quickly move on to the next speaker, another co-collaborator, PARD, Partnership of Religion and Development. We have Dr. Jennifer McCarthy joining us from Germany. It's already late. Thank you, Jennifer, for staying up. Jennifer has worked over 10 years in different parts of the world, in Afghanistan, Indonesia, Myanmar, on various developmental work. And within PARD, she facilitates the work streams, including the work stream on water, environment, and climate action. So tell us, Jennifer, what is PARD and how it contributes to the SDGs, especially goal number 6, and maybe something about how faith communities can realize its full potential in achieving the SDG 6. 5 to 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, Dinesh. I can promise that I'll be shorter than that, so I'll win you back some time. I'll do my best anyway. Good afternoon and good evening to everybody. It really is a pleasure to be here at this event alongside so many esteemed colleagues, so thank you for the opportunity. I'd like Dinesh to briefly address the second point, which you mentioned. How can faith community realize its full potential to address SDG 6? So in my view, multi-stakeholder partnerships, or MSPs, that really offer inclusive spaces are one way forward that can really enable faith and traditional communities to develop alongside government, multilateral entities, and academic colleagues, for example, to develop not only a joint understanding, but also a common language on the state of affairs, the sad state of affairs with regard to water and sanitation and action needed. I suggest that a partnership like PARD, which I'll explain very briefly in a minute, can offer such opportunities for faith-based and traditional actors to really sit around a table with stakeholders, from different communities, secular as well as faith-based, including multilateral entities, in order to share, learn, plan, and advocate within these inclusive spaces. So I'll just give you a very brief peek into what PARD is, and hopefully go some way to illustrating how such a partnership can perhaps add value to your ongoing work towards SDG 6. So the International Partnership for Religion and Sustainable Development convenes governments, multilateral entities, civil society, especially religious, traditional, and faith-based actors, as well as academia in a safe space, providing a continuous opportunity for dialogue, learning, and collaboration to better inform policy and practices in achieving the SDGs. And I would argue, as mentioned earlier, also to recognize the humanity that is at the root of the SDGs. So PARD is commissioned by BMZ, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, meaning that BMZ are the main funder of PARD at the moment. However, other governments are also members and have supported PARD in the past, including the US, UK, Canada, and Denmark. Beyond this, the Swiss, Norwegian, and Indonesian governments are PARD members as well. PARD started out in 2016, and since its inception has evolved into a dynamic MSP, bringing together 157 members, including organizations from 8 different religions or traditions. At the root of PARD is the recognition of the crucial role that religious and traditional actors play in achieving the SDGs. And we seek to build new partnerships for their achievement, particularly relating to Goal 17, partnerships for the goals. Within PARD, in our work stream, we aim to engage as many members from each constituency as possible, so to really enable informed and diverse dialogue in safe spaces to take forward joint planning, as I mentioned earlier. So we offer members the chance to join in any of our 4 work streams. We have one on health, so SDG 3, gender equality and empowerment, which is SDG 5, sustaining peace, SDG 16, and we have, as Dinesh mentioned, a We Care work stream, which is water, environment, and climate action, and we call it We Care in short. And this, of course, includes work on SDG 6. On the We Care subpage of the PARD website, you can find out more about PARD members within that work stream and find out more about those working on SDG 6 more specifically. And one interesting piece of work is that in the past year, PARD members commissioned a mapping of faith-based actors working on environmental SDGs, including SDG 6, and we hope to have these data available to members via an online tool within the coming 12 months. That's just a very short, brief peek into PARD and the added value that our members tell us that PARD as a partnership offers. And I really think that one way for faith and traditional communities to reach potential in working towards this SDG is indeed to show up at the table that is offered by MSPs such as PARD and to meaningfully engage in these inclusive and diverse spaces, take advantage of those opportunities and be ready to jointly learn, share, network, and collaborate with stakeholders from other stakeholder groups as well.
Thank you.
That's all from
you
me.
So much.
You're welcome.
Now we move on to the last speaker of the day, and we have Eva. Please come over. Eva Markovic is an environmental organizer from Serbia, and is the program director of the Organization for Political Ecology, Policol, and a co-founder of the initiative Right to Water. And the detailed introductions are already sent to you. So to save time, I will straight away ask Eva to help us understand what is the People's Water Forum, because she is one of the members along with us, the Ecumenical Water Network of WCC, a founding member of People's Water Forum. So please tell us, what is it, PWF, and what is the Water Justice Manifesto? Please introduce.
Thank you very much for having me here. So People's Water Forum appeared as a reaction. There was different events happening around water. Example, in 1996, there was a body called World Water Council that was formed. Many of you probably know this. I apologize if you already know the story. That included a lot of big corporations as well. So Nestle, Suez, big polluters, Coca-Cola, they were all there at the table speaking about the water from a very, very different perspective than what we are hearing today. Of course, with the government officials, with the UN institutions included, but still these kind of discussions that were framed in in World Water Forum were not enough from the perspective of people who are the voices of the people who are actually endangered by privatization, water grabbing, and all of the things that we all know are happening around the world. And then all of us being so frustrated by this kind of organizing, decided to make alternative water forum that would follow World Water Forum. But in last year, we decided that we don't want to be an alternative. We are the true ones. We are not any kind of outsiders of this. We are working with people who are at the front lines, with truly endangered people, and they're the ones that should be not just the, as they call stakeholder, the right holders. If we can bring something from the entire event, it's a right holder, not the stakeholder. And then People's Water Forum appeared. It's actually a space, it's a platform through which we coordinate different water justice movements. And I will shortly say what's the latest and the most important because of the time.
Yeah.
The most important today is that we launched yesterday our Water Justice Manifesto. It has 9 points. All of them are really, really important. I don't have time to go in details through all of them especially because many of you already mentioned several of the points that are there. But just to say, we're speaking about general access to water and sanitation as a common good, as a human rights, the management of water. So we have to go into details, into specifics. We cannot just proclaim some slogans. We need to be specific. So management also needs to be common. Protection of lakes, rivers, and other natural goods. And I will go through your last question with this, why I'm not speaking about resources, but about goods and commons. Rights of indigenous peoples, really important. They already have knowledge how to govern sustainably, and we're forgetting that. To come back to that, and community management, which is important as an opposition for private interest and in entering any kind of exploitation business around water. Rural and informal settlements, sometimes we forget people who are right in our neighborhoods, who are living in urban areas but in informal conditions, and they also have they're ones of the most endangered by lack of water and sanitation access. And it's really a pressing issue, as we saw also everywhere around the world with the pandemics, like asking us to wash our hands, to keep the hygiene at the highest level, and then not turning the blind eye when we see that people don't have water to wash their hands. Participation, which means also putting women on board and having a special consideration of their role and their role of getting the water, sanitation, hygiene, and food and cooking and everything that is in their traditional roles, and acknowledging this and also participation from other, not just gender roles, but also everyone who are in different positions, if they don't have enough money to pay, or if they are discriminated by race or wherever you have as discrimination, also water outside of our homes. Water, if we say that if it's public good, then it should be available in the streets, it should be available in open markets where people informally sell and trade, and this is really important of public health. It's not only some luxurious fountains that we need drinking water, clean water in public spaces as well. In working spaces, workers who are working, doesn't matter how many hours, every second they have to have access to clean water and sanitation. At the end, as a last point, we were having a special view on what UN is and how we need to strengthen the monitoring, how we need another, and I would not call it alternative, but a true safe space for water where we can discuss and we can coordinate and we can actually make some change. So not just have discussion, but also put power in the hands. And as an off point, like 9 points are there, but a very important one and very close to my heart. Water defenders are prosecuted and are attacked all around the world. They are the ones that they're working in the public interest, and they're targeted all the time by the private sector, but also by their governments. And this cannot go on. These are the people who are actually keeping the line for everyone. And we see that on working with them a lot, how much pressures they are suffering, and sometimes even victims. Maybe just to catch, because of the time, for like why I'm not a member of any faith community, to be honest, but I don't see how we can, as several of you mentioned, how we can change the discourse without faith communities. It's impossible to change the narrative, and I would maybe just to go one step further, maybe even to set a critique on the sustainable development concept, where we have economy equal as a social, where we have environment equal as an economy. That's not true. That's not reality that we're living in. So the environment sustains social context, which then uses the economy at its service, and not the other way around. We need to switch this. We need to switch this narrative. We need to switch the value of the nature as we're speaking about it, not just water, but in this case, water especially. And I just to quote Gramsci, but I really believe we have all this pessimism of intellect. We have all the data telling us things are terrible and they're going to get worse. What we need from faith community is the optimism of the will. We need people to believe in something, that something is possible to happen, that it's not only that we're waiting for scientists, okay, tell us how to solve this, put numbers on the table. We even have that. What we don't have is this belief that it's possible to change, that it's possible to say you cannot exploit anymore a water source that is a common good. This is even unimaginable to the people, but I really believe we can get together. Somehow we can overcome this challenge of thought, challenge of idea, what's possible.
Thank you very much. Thank you for challenging and believing in the faith community's potentials. Friends, you can always find the Water Justice Manifesto. Just Google it, or click on the program that is here. And please do endorse it. We are not closing the signing of the Water Justice
we
Manifesto.
Have already several.
We have 600 plus organizations have already signed. So please,
you're not alone.
So friends, we'll take a few questions or comments, brief comments from the participants in the house or even online. We thank everyone for sticking on for so long. So please feel free to respond any questions, comments, and our panelists will be first taking few questions and then responding depending on whom you're addressing this question to. And the responses and questions both has to be very short. And my battery is almost dying, so I don't know, we will lose out the other group, but please go ahead. Yes, identify yourself briefly and then to the point. Go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is George Demidorf. I work with Church World Service. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts today. Several of you did mention, including our last speaker, the importance of optimism and the belief that things can change. Clearly, this is something we all wrestle with, not just with water, but frankly, anything to do with the climate challenges our world is facing. So I'm wondering, in very practical terms, maybe even personal terms, could you all maybe name one thing quickly that gives you yourself optimism that change is possible, and in that way perhaps helps you in your own evangelism on this issue? Thank you.
When I see change with the people that I'm working with, like if I can change one person to think differently within, I don't know, months, and it's not about me, it's just opening the stories, opening the possibilities for them to think differently, and then them choosing what they want to believe as a story. And I cannot, there is nothing more fulfilling and nothing that's a very tangible, even though it sounds abstract, but it's very tangible change that I can prove. So it is possible. It is possible to grow hope within the community. And I really think that the faith community is important for speaking about collectivism. We're really down now in the world of individualism. Everyone are alone, everyone are by themselves, everyone are atomized, but we need to come together. And this feeling of being together in some story, that's what keeps me up. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? But also think there is online, there is a question from Reverend Rachel Marsh from South Africa, that in some countries, water is enshrined in the constitution, but in other countries, it's not. So how does one push for access to free water in countries where it is not enshrined in the constitution as a law? So maybe...
For the question on optimism and what gives us hope, the whole point of the multiplication of human rights defenders for water, as we move on, as we speak, more and more people are getting committed to the task. That's a sign of hope.
Yes,
I can speak, and maybe this will sound redundant, but I want to name the young people. I think that can bring hope. The activation and the excitement and enthusiasm in our next generation. I hope that everyone in this space can be excited by that, because there's a lot of really, great leaders that are coming up that hopefully can lead, follow everyone's lead that's in this room. That brings me home.
Well, I think that it is very obvious the UN Water Conference would not take place, that we need the state actors, the financial actors to solve the water problem. But on the other side, I think what the faith communities bring to the table is that they are about practical life of everyone. And I think this is something where people really can get hope, not only just for themselves, but to connect, for example, as we do it in our book here, Creation Care and Loving Our Neighbors, to connect the topic of water to one of the major values of our faith community, love your neighbor as yourself, is really effectful. And people see it is not only just voting for a government that then might be in favor of water, but they can start on a very basic level to look around. Does everybody in my community have the necessary drinking water? What can our community do to ensure this? Or also, if you come from an area where the problem of, like me in Germany, where the problem of drinking water seems to be solved for the moment being, to be engaged in areas, I think that brings a lot of hope to people where other problems are extremely complicated and hard to understand, or even the scientific community might be of different opinion. I feel there's a starting point for engaging people to change this world to the good, to change the relationship with others to the good. And that gives them hope also to go for much more complicated problems.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop. Anyone else would like to take on the Constitution, enshrining in the Constitution? Maybe Maud, you are an expert in that.
Well, enshrining the human right to water and sanitation in your Constitution is really important. I know that Mexico did that, and then a subsequent government tried to bring in a law privatizing all the water services, and the movement in Mexico was able to say, no, you can't do it. You can't do both. You can't enshrine the human right to water in the Constitution and then turn around and make it a for-profit, resource, which is what they were thinking. And they won that fight because they had done that homework. So it is important. But other countries have brought in separate legislation. It's complicated to change the Constitution. Our movement in Chile has been trying to redo the Chilean Constitution since Pinochet's. The Constitution is still the one that he wrote. It's awful. And they had a referendum and they lost just a couple of months ago, a month ago, and people are very sad. But there's the hope is that you can't. Here's what I've learned in my life of activism: you can't say I want this, and if I don't get this, I've lost or we've lost. And therefore I'm a failure. We have to look at building a movement. And listening to you talking about the World Water Forum, I was there not at the 97 or 96 one, because that's the bad guys got together and formed themselves. But we went to The Hague in 2000. We were in Istanbul and Mexico. We followed them around and we interrupted, and we were bad. We really gave them grief. We had the one in Japan, in Tokyo. The folks there said, we don't like noisy or rude interruptions. So what we did was we went into the big assembly. It was all run by the World Bank and all the water companies. They were all at the front, and we brought little bells. And we tinkled the bell when there were little lies, and then there were a lot of tinkling when there were bigger lies, and it was we destroyed it. It was just spectacular. So just hearing you, and then when we got to France, to Marseille, we then had our own venue for the first time, like our own presence. So just to hear that this is continuing and that we're building that movement, that's the hope and that's the goal.
Yeah.
If you say I have to have this and this and this, you think that you can control it, and you can't. It's very complicated, but there's been such movement in Chile. They will come back. It will happen. And I remember standing in the General Assembly of the United Nations on July 28th, 2010, and we were sure we were going to lose this.
Yeah.
And I was holding hands with some of the staff who were in tears because they were sure we were going to lose. And boom, I think it was 121 in favor and 41 or 2, my numbers. None of them, not even my country at the time that was taking such an awful position, had the courage to vote against it. They abstained, right? Oh, it is awful. How could you vote against the human right to water? Well, I guess we'll abstain. And since then, all the countries have endorsed it, by the way, including Canada has also endorsed the United Nations resolution on the rights of Indigenous people. I mean, we do move, but it's a process, and seeing it as a process and yourself as a part of that process is incredibly important, or you'll burn out. And just last word on this, I really think we need to think about the difference between grief and despair, and understanding that we have to have a place for grief, collective grief, and understanding of what we're up against and the pain that we've heard so eloquently here today, and what that means, but not letting it lead to despair, because despair is a closed door. And I quote an American poet who says, I feel despair, but I don't set a chair for it at my table. So it's having faith, and that's the faith-based part of this. It doesn't have to be a religious thing in that sense, that others are doing things that you can't even know about and never met you before. you know, and this is the miracle. And if we don't give this to young people, shame on us. We don't give this hope, shame on us.
Thank you, Maud. Thank you for encouraging words. Friends, keeping the time in mind, I would ask Bishop Temple and Kenneth, you haven't spoken, maybe about 30 seconds to 1 minute, last words, if you want to leave any thoughts before I call you.
And my last word, I want to re-echo what Archbishop Thomas said. You know, the relationship of love for neighbor and water. Because of faith, we should be able to ask the question, can my neighbor have a drink, please?
Thank you.
Yes, so I think this sums up, Bishop, because this conversation we are having about water is a discussion on how do we give dignity to all of it. And I'm glad that we are here agreeing that this is not a struggle for which we can give up, because it's a struggle that will go on for a very long time, and it is best passed on from one generation to the other. When I sit next to some of the heroes and heroines of such struggle who retell stories of success and failure, but who kept on the struggle, I think this is what gives me hope, and that encourages us to keep on going.
Thank you very much. So I now call upon my fellow co-organizer from World Evangelical Alliance, Matthias, and he's also a co-lead in part along with me for water and environment, to kindly summarize very quickly, but in a few minutes. Over to you, Matthias.
Yes, thank you so much, Dinesh. And indeed, it is a very challenging task to summarize now a very rich session, especially after this final round of very inspirational sharing and thought. So thank you. Thank you to all speakers. We have heard from Pedro Arroyo Agudo, the Special Rapporteur on the Human Right to Water and Sanitation. We have heard from Reverend Dr. Kenneth Matata for the World Council of Churches. We have heard from Maud Barlow, head of the Blue Planet Project, Archbishop Thomas Paul Schirmacher from the World Evangelical Alliance, Iyad Abu Mohli from Faith for Earth Coalition of United Nations Environment Program, Christine Mangele, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, Bishop Temple, AACC and Ecumenical Water Network, Jennifer McCarthy from PART, and Eva Markovic, Initiative Right to Water and champion of the World Water Justice Manifesto. Thank you so much. So this has been rich, and let me say, this has been mostly organized and convened by Dinesh and the World Council of Churches Ecumenical Water Network. So Dinesh, a big applause to you. Thank you for championing this conversation for years, and thank you that you do this with a lot of passion. And what we've heard today with wise hope, that's a beautiful term we've learned from Maud, and this is exactly what we see a lot with you, Dinesh. As I said, it's very important, very difficult to summarize a very rich session, but I think two things stand out that we can take into the rest of the UN Water Conference the next days. Water for life is much more important than water for profit. We discussed this in all necessary differentiation, and I think that's really key. We do not say private sector should be completely eliminated out of the water discussion. So Pedro, for example, has offered a very helpful ethical reflection on the various functions of water with those three levels to keep in mind, different levels of ethical priority, and economic use is there. But it's on the third level. So maybe we can keep that in mind. The solution will not be to eliminate private sector and businesses completely from water management, but to make sure that the framework in which water is a business is just and governed by a democratic process. The second thing, as we are in the context of UN Water Conference here in New York, there is the need for an intergovernmental body on the level of the UN, a coordinated mechanism within the UN, which is accountable not only to governments, but also to citizens in general. All of us who are here, this is something we can keep an eye on and monitor closely during the course of the conference, and here and there also emphasize by contributions we may make. So let's specifically monitor this and hopefully achieve the goal with this conference to get a step closer to giving water a home in the UN, as you've beautifully coined it. As this is a faith-related event, the importance of water to faith groups and the importance of faith groups to water was highlighted. And we heard about the spiritual significance of water from several speakers. We heard how water connects to the holy texts of Abrahamic religions, and in fact, how water connects to all religions, and all religions speak about water. We heard how instrumental faith communities were to inspire the human right to water and sanitation, and also to even give SDG 6 the right and necessary language here and there. There was so much more in the session. I cannot mention everything. I do not need to mention everything. Let me thank everyone again. Maybe you have turned blue while you were here. Then please let Maud know, because this is her dream. Maybe you found out that people of faith care about water. Then that's great. Please spread the word. That is also the goal of our session. Maybe you have even found or rediscovered faith. Then let me say from my faith tradition, hallelujah. Am I allowed to say this here? Okay, and again, I want to re-emphasize that there's a beautiful term coined today, the wise hope. Maybe our session today has given you some starting points or further arguments to be hopeful. This is really what we hope and we're intending with this session. Christine has reminded us of the importance of listening. So thanks for listening. Thanks for coming. Have a great rest of the UN Water Conference, and happy World Water Day to all of you.
Yes. Thank you. And that brings us to a close of the very, very long but important side event. Thank you so much. If there is any coffee, tea left, please have it. And thanks, Ryan, for getting this organized. Thank you so much for those who joined online and still at odd hours connected with us. Thank you so much once again. Bye-bye.